You don't really need to take notes on this section, which I'm calling helpful hints, but you do want to watch because I'm going to help you out by giving you some things to look out for and some strategies to help you be more successful. Let's say the two angles that we were talking about were here and here, and I asked you what kind of angle pair they were. So the first thing you would need to really do is do your best to avoid this part of the diagram because it's not important. You could cover it with a piece of paper if that helps. If it's on the screen, that's going to be a little bit more difficult to do. But the first thing you want to recognize is which line is the transversal. So do you think it's the red, the blue, or the green? Well, hopefully you could see that it's the green. And once we have these angles isolated, we could see that they're both in the interior space, and one is on the um, they're on alternate sides of the transversal, so that would make them alternate interior angles. So again, one strategy would be to cover or ignore parts of the diagram so that you can focus just on the angle pair that you are trying to look at. Let's do one more example. Let's say the angles that we were trying to figure out were here and here. You would want to try to ignore this part of the diagram, and then you would see that the red line is the transversal, and these both occupy the same position, which is like the lower right, and if you were to trace the parts that make this up, you would see a sort of funky looking letter F. So these would be corresponding angles. So let's take a look at one more hint. You could get into a situation like this where you're asked to determine what kind of angle pairs you have, but you don't have really a complete drawing. So one thing that you may want to do is try to extend the lines so that they look more like the original picture we studied. So first locate the transversal. The transversal is the one that deals with both angles. Since this piece here goes from one angle to the other, it's got to be the transversal. So if we were to continue this, and we'll continue it in both directions, and we were to continue this, it would look a lot more like the other diagrams that we've studied, and now you would probably see that these are alternate interior angles. Now if we go back in time before we did that, they're still alternate interior angles even without those extended parts of the diagram. If we were to trace this, we would get the letter Z. That's another way that we know we're dealing with alternate interior angles. And one final thing to be aware of, sometimes you might be asked to tell me what kind of angle pair we're dealing with, and you also have to know your linear pair and your vertical. So if you don't have a situation that's going, like down the transversal, like this one, from one section up at the top to another section down at the bottom, you might just be dealing with something that you learned in the past, like vertical angles or like a linear pair. And one final note, I promise, be aware that it is possible to see angles in a position which we haven't really discussed. So this is none of the angle pairs here. I mean, you could describe these as on the same side and exterior, but we haven't talked about that. Here's another example of an angle pair that's not going to fit any of the descriptions that we've talked about. So just keep these hints in mind as you're practicing. Hope that they were in fact helpful, otherwise they should not have been named helpful hints.